All right, welcome back. It is 9 March 2026. This is video number 94. And we're going to get into questions. Okay. And first, I just want to go over something real quick. Um, the, I'm sure this has been out for a while, but I just started using it the last month or so since the Epstein files came out. And it's AI. So, what I did is I downloaded almost every single AI app I could find on my phone. And then I went and I looked at all the different apps, got them set up, and asked questions. And I specifically asked them questions that were really, really obscure questions about information that basically only I knew, maybe just me and a few other people, and see which ones got the best answers. Now, what I found is there were three that I got the best answers for. All the other ones, you can ask general questions like you know, who shot Lincoln, you know, what date did the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor? You can get information like that, but on obscure information, personalized obscure information, I was able to get the best results on this one right here called Perplexity. Now, Perplexity is an AI combo. It's like the mega crawler search engines back in the 90s where it would take the results of well, they didn't have Google back then, and that's all Google really is a mega crawler search engine. But back before they had Netscape, and they had in the 90s they had Netscape, and I think they had Yahoo, and they had Web Crawler and Dogpile and all these different ones. And then Metacrawler would take the results from all those, combine them, and clean them up, and just dump them from highest amount of hits to lowest. So what AI seems to do is it does the same thing, but then it pulls from those articles and puts it in kind of a novella, paragraph readable form of information. But the problem with that is you're not sure how it's what its logic is in pulling that information and excluding other information. Okay, so and again, that all depends on the writer of the program, right? Whatever their priorities are, that's what's going to come out. But at least with Perplexity, it's pulling from all these various engines instead of just one people's bias or whatever. So I've been using this to go over the Epstein files, and it's very, very interesting. Um, so what we found out from the Epstein files basically is that there is um, a large group of very, very wealthy people that are basically getting away with rapes and murders and laughing at us all as they turn us against each other, black against white, conservative against the liberal. I mean, because in this group of elites around Epstein, you've got Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, scientists, Hollywood, military people, intelligence people, university educators. I mean, there's not a career field that Epstein wasn't dipping his toe in. Because, see, before, the narrative for 20 years was that Epstein was just, this very wealthy guy that liked having sex with young girls, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And what we find out is that's not the case. That is part of the case, but it's not the entire case. He was having sex with his other rich elites with 8, 9, 10 year olds. Not only were they having sex with them, and they were raping them, beating them, torturing them, killing them, and in some cases even eating them. Okay, and it kind of reminds me of that movie They Live, you know, without the aliens. But who knows? Maybe there are. At another level, there's the aliens. I don't know. I don't really believe in that shit. But it's definitely like that movie they live, where there's an elite alien group, and then right below them is the rich elite um, humans who have signed up in order to get power and money and all this kind of thing. And that seems to be the case here with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I don't believe that everybody that sent an email or went to Jeffrey Epstein's house was raping little girls. Okay, I think it's a graduated process, um, because Epstein was trying to get his foot in the door with everybody: educators, scientists, bankers, investors, politicians, intelligence, military, every career field you can think of. He was there. And what this also reminds me of is, General Y or General X in the JFK movie, um, talking about the secret team. But what I think he was talking about when he talked about the secret team was the group of ultra conservative military industrial intelligence network type people that tried to affect policy around the world. We see the results of that inside the Trump administration right now. Now, a lot of people are trying to say the secret team is Israel, Mossad, all that kind of shit. But it's pretty damn obvious when you look at the um, Epstein files that the Israeli Mossad, through Ehud Barak and maybe some other people in Israel, was a very, very tiny, small portion of its contacts. Now, he probably would have sold them information, and I think that's probably one of the things of his operation was to blackmail people, control them, and get information from them and sell it to whoever, whether Israeli Mossad, CIA, FBI, Russian intelligence, who knows? I don't know. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But I've been using AI to dig and get a lot more information. It seems to be, which I can understand why, very resistant to any type of things that's not solid, right? They got a document for it. Okay. But then when you look at pictures and EFTA numbers, and you see documents and pictures with the heads of Google, okay, and the heads of, hold on one second, please. Okay, yeah, but it seems like Epstein's group seemed to be all around the world in every career field, vocational, banking, intelligence, advertising, uh, you know, AI, Google, Facebook, Instagram, all these. And there were different levels. It seemed like there was a phishing campaign. He would send out invites to people joining him at a party at his mansion. And send out is it's kind of on two different levels. Okay, I guess you could say two. And I'm involved in sales, so you know about this. Hold on one second. Let me bring this out. All right, so here we go. I am definitely not an artist or graphics or anything like that, but this is kind of how it works. Now, I've been involved in sales for about 30 years, and um, this is what you would call the sales funnel or the reverse upside down pyramid. Okay, and it actually works the other way when it comes to elites. That all the people are down here at the bottom, the elites are at the top. But in the prospecting part of what I think um, Epstein was up to was the sales funnel. Okay, and you have different streams coming in. So you've got young girls and models. So he was recruiting, had Ghislaine Maxwell running around to Palm Beach Junior College and up in New York to high schools and recruiting certain types of girls that he knew that his clientele, the people he was going for, young blonde girls, would be going for. And that all kind of innocently started there. Hey, you ever thought about getting into modeling? Or hey, you ever thought about doing massages and stuff like that? And so that was that phase, the grooming part with Ghislaine Maxwell. They take him shopping, buy him clothes. All that seemed like the up and up. Oh, this new adult friend's now my mentor for modeling or massage or business or real estate, whatever they're into. And then it moves to the next level of, well, you know, um, in order to do modeling, you're going to have to take your clothes off in some instances, even if you're underage. It's just the way it is. And then the next level, or at least part with that, would be the giving massages to Epstein. Who That's how you can tell Epstein's not at the top tier, is because if he was at the top tier, he'd have a lower level person testing them out. I think he was testing them out for the elites. That tells you his position in the group. Okay, the CEO of a corporation is not going to test out your products. You're going to have a line manager, a floor manager, doing that for you, or an engineer. Okay, so that's what he was doing there, and then he would work his way, through money, through shame, through threats, things like that. He'd work them into working for him. They'd either flee or they would stay with him because they were either too stupid to know any better, or they needed the money, or they were afraid of the threats. Moved into that section there, and then down here were the beatings, the rapes, all these things, and then eventually get down to some of them were killed, apparently buried at Trump's golf course in various locations, or buried at Zora Ranch, or chopped up, thrown in the ocean down in the Virgin Islands. And then, so that's one stream right there that he's working on. And that's where you see most of the lawsuits and everything going on right there. Now, in here, you're going to have different people from different vocations. You've got a business, banking, people like that. Okay. And they're going to start off pretty innocuous, that they either are friends with someone that Epstein knows, or they bump into Maxwell, they bump into Epstein and say, hey, I got a party. Oh, yeah, I got an idea with this, I got an idea for that, business deal or trade or whatever. It's all on the up and up. And that's what it seems like. All right, there, I got an idea for a movie or whatever. And that's all on the up and up. And hey, why don't you come by one of our dinners we're having? And then at the dinners, he's going to have some of these girls. Okay. And then he's going to tell them, hey, you can make an extra $100, $200, whatever, to get your arm around, um, hang on to Trump, or hang on to Bill Gates, or hang on to Musk. Be on his arm all the time. See what you take. So they're casting the bait out there, okay? Or Prince Andrew. Meanwhile, these guys don't know, or choose not to know, that these girls are underage. Okay? These are the 16, 17-year-old girls. Then, if they consummate, they seal the deal, they're moving on. They got the whole room, everything, the bedroom, wired for sound, video. They got them. Okay? Now it's either a blackmail thing. The wife's going to find out. The FBI is going to find out that girl was 16, 17, all this kinds of stuff. Um, Now they're sealed at the hip. They're not going anywhere. Okay? And then, if you want to get them a little further down, you're going to bring them in with the underage, 13, 14, 10, 11, 12-year-old girls here. Okay? That definitely gets them in. This is seal of brotherhood. They're not going to, if you rat on me, I'm going to rat on you. This right here section And this section here is what got Jeffrey Epstein killed. Okay. And then they moved to here where they're beating them, they're torturing them, they're going to Epstein Island, all these kinds of things. And then it ends up with some of them participating in the murder or cannibalism of the victims. Okay. And then, of course, over here, you've got the people like Woody Allen, possibly Bill Clinton, definitely Trump, who are already into these things. They don't have to be convinced, okay? They find out about Epstein, and they're moving down this line to further and further. We read that, and even Prince Andrew would be in this category. The ones that they don't have to convince. They're already out there hunting, okay? And they're moving down this line, sleeping with Ghislaine Guthrie, maybe sleeping, Trump forcing 13-year-olds to have sex with him, down to this line where he forces a 13-year-old girl to have an abortion and kills the baby. And that puts him into that category right here. It's all moving toward this section. Now, down in this section would be the cannibalism, the Satanism, all that. This would be the light torture, the rapes, things like this. This would just be the underage. This would be, definitely below 15. This would be like 15 to 18 and above right here. Okay. So that's kind of what I think it is. Now, the whole purpose of this, I don't know. Who knows? I think it has to do with power and control. Whoever is paying Epstein, because Epstein is definitely not the top fish, okay? The top dog. Even though he's got all that money, he's definitely not the top dog. He definitely knew where the bodies were buried. That's why they had him killed, okay? But there's somebody else at the top of the food chain. Now, who that is, I don't know. Is it the same people that eliminated Kennedy? Probably associations, you know. Although, when you get down closer to the assassins, you've got groups that may not know each other, okay? But they're all working for the same purpose from the group above, okay? Now, I used to listen to, God, what was that? David Icke back in the 90s, and it just got to be too much, fucking lizard aliens from the fifth dimension or, something like that. I don't know. But if you can get away from that part, if you can separate off, that Queen Elizabeth was, I don't know, 500-year-old lizard alien from, I don't know, the Dragon system, whatever, or from the fifth dimension. If you can get away from that, his structure, he's got it down. Okay, it's the reverse of what I just showed you. Um, I, I would even count out. You don't even need the alien part. I don't see any evidence for that. Um, I mean, humans are pretty bad enough just on their own. You know, we've done some horrible things to each other just on our own. Just go ask Hitler. You know, but this is even bigger than Hitler, I think, because this is worldwide. Hitler was just in Germany and then wherever he could put his military, and look at the damage he did. But these people seem to be, whoever they are, whatever their agenda is, it's sort of like the eyes, that movie, The Eyes Wide Shut, Eyes Wide Shut, whatever. Stanley Kubrick seemed to be onto something there. Um, I always just thought it was a bunch of old rich perverts that, you know, I got more money than God, so I can do what I want. I don't know. Now, to refocus it all back to the Kennedy assassination, I definitely believe there were definitely a, I guess for lack of a better word, a cabal of like-minded people in the military, the intelligence community, the industrial, military industrial complex, manufacturers, the business, the private businesses, the banking industry. They were all, on other issues they may disagree, but on Kennedy they all agree they needed to get rid of him. Okay, and but they didn't want to leave their fingerprints of it being them, even though it's pretty obvious when you see who benefits from everything that happened after Kennedy. It was definitely them, but you can't just obviously come out and say, "Yeah, it was us." So you pin it on someone else, okay? And you have basically two thing elements here. You have the group that's going to carry it out, and the group that's going to get, or the person that's going to get pinned onto. So the group, logically, okay, would be the mafia, anti-Castro Cubans, neo-Nazi mercenaries that were possibly involved in training anti-Castro Cubans or were grifting in that arena. Okay, so you've got those groups, and then you've got CIA, FBI handlers up above them that are trying to control them and steer them and funding them and arming them and all kinds of stuff. Okay, because you can't just have an armed group running around the United States attacking a foreign country, practicing violent revolution and murdering people without the government stepping in. Okay, so if I had a group of people running around inside the United States right now, even with Trump in office or any administration, planning the overthrow of any group, any country, or any assassination of any person, they would be under intense scrutiny by the FBI. Okay, and depending on when their actions became illegal, would be rounded up and hauled off. But for some reason, these groups weren't. And was the FBI and CIA just looking the other way so that hopefully they would knock off Castro, or were they looking the other way to steer them in the direction of going after Kennedy? And you can find, and many people have talked about this, many people have gone over this. You find this group in what these different amalgamations of MLASH, ZR Rifle, Project 40, all these different project names were geared toward getting rid of Castro. And like many people have said, I think they just turned it and focused it on Kennedy. And then they had Johnson either waiting in the wings or actively participating. I'm not sure which one. I think he knew about it. And then, you know, don't tell me the details. I mean, because if you look what happened to Johnson, it's more proof of what he knew. Because whether you believe Madeline Brown or whatever, I happen to believe some of the things she says. Now, what happens with people like that when they gain notoriety, they do seem to puff up more names and things and stuff that really wasn't there. But doesn't mean that the essential elements of the story wasn't correct. I'm not like one of these persons that, oh, they got caught in one lie, so everything they said you have to write off. I'm not that kind of person. I don't believe that's humans are fallible. They say 99% good things, and then they have 1% things that fuck them up. Okay, so and then you look at what happened with right after Kennedy's assassinated. Within a year, not even a year, we've got the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and that's been proven to be completely false. The North Vietnamese didn't send torpedoes into the water. That was all that radar information was made up. We were attacking them already with our ships and commando ships, attacking the North Koreans without congressional authorization, without nobody knowing about it, with our own ships. And just like the senator from Oregon said, we were conducting operations and they came out to stop us, and we fucked them up. But they used that incident for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And of course, there's that memo that said they rescinded the memo that Kennedy wrote to start withdrawing 1,000 men a month. Okay. And that memo was dated the day or two before, I think the 20th of November, before Kennedy was assassinated. So it was already in the work, it was pre planned. And again, like I've said before, you got to think about Oswald. He's just carrying out a mission. They're saying, here, go there. There's lots of people that have come forward that used to be, they're not FBI agents, they're not CIA agents, they're informants, they're paid actors. You know, I was just listening to a video yesterday, a couple of days ago, of a guy in Seattle that had infiltrated some group in Seattle, some radical group, and he was an instigator, encouraged by the FBI, paid by the FBI to get them to. They were going to blow up a bomb on a bridge, and the bomb was going to kill the leader, and then give the FBI, enough moxie or whatever to go in and just arrest all these guys. It's called the Seattle Eight or something like that. And that's when this guy spoke out after the person got killed. And I saw the same thing in Oregon when I lived in Oregon. Okay, we had this group called the Portland Seven, which were seven Muslims that after 9/11, tried to get into Afghanistan and kill American soldiers through China. They couldn't do it. They came back. Then they had planned to go into synagogues, my synagogue, and blow themselves up and kill as many people as possible. They were thwarted by the FBI. Well, um, a lawyer who was married to a Muslim who had converted to Islam, he was a white American guy. Um, he was defending some of these guys and a Palestinian who had funded this thing that worked for Intel. And they arrested him on false charges, saying that his fingerprints were found on a bag in the Madrid bombing, in Madrid, Spain. He'd never been to Madrid. They used the Patriot Act, the sneak and peek part of the Patriot Act that Obama got rid of, to go into his house, possibly plant information, but definitely to look in his computer. And the way the law works is they could snoop around, look at his computer, look at his phone records, and then if they found something, then they could get a warrant and go in and seize the information. It's kind of, big violation of the Constitution, I believe. And then they got the fingerprints from the suitcase, and their FBI guys said it was definitely the attorney fingerprints on there. He'd never been to Spain. They sent it to the Spanish equivalent of the FBI, and they said no, these don't match. And the FBI insisted that they did match. Eventually, they dropped the charges. They made this attorney disappear for months. No attorney, no phone call, no bail, nothing. Not even sawing it to see a judge. Eventually, he got released. He sued the FBI. They quietly paid him what, $500,000 or something like that for damaged reputation and loss of business, things like that. And then a few years later, this Somali guy, who's a student down in Corvallis, this is almost an exact copy of what happened with the Seattle Eight and that other informant. So this Somali guy, he couldn't, he's 19. He couldn't get a girl to go out with him. He was, his parents had brought him to the United States, and he told a couple friends that, hey, I hate America. I hate living here. I wish I could go back to Somalia. And one of the guys who he knew was in trouble with the FBI and went to the FBI and made a deal with them that he would work as undercover informant for them, and they would encourage this guy to take further actions. They would push him along and see how far he would go. Okay, which that's just like entrapment, I think. But so this guy introduced him to another guy who was an FBI agent and helped him create a bomb. The kid never would have been able to make a bomb without this guy. The guy made it for him. Okay, they went out to the coast and tested it out, and of course the FBI said, who's saying along the way, "Are you sure this is really what you want to do? Well, if you really want to do this, then you should do this or you should do that." And so then, long story short, they have a tree lighting ceremony at Pioneer Courthouse Square in Portland, the end of November, right after Thanksgiving. And they got the kid in a van with this bomb, supposedly, and they took him there and they put him on, got a cell phone. Okay. The guy was like leading him the whole way. Okay, now you do this and you do that. And he helped him pick the target. Okay. You're going to park the van here. And, you know, I know this area pretty well, and you can't park a damn van there. But the FBI had told the police not to bother the van and to leave him alone. So they made it available to be bombed. But of course, it was an inert bomb. And they showed the guy how to arm the bomb and how to make the bomb and how to. They practically made the damn bomb for him because the kid wasn't smart enough to make the bomb. And how to wire it and hook it up to this cell phone, and then he was going to say Allah Akbar and then push a couple of numbers and boom, blow it up and kill Americans. Well, the time came, he goes Allah Akbar, and he pushed, the bomb didn't go off. The van doors flew open. The FBI swooped in and arrested him. I mean, they practically led him by the nose through the whole terrorist thing. And why would they do that? Very strange. Anyway, my whole point of all of this is that the FBI can definitely do things to encourage people to do illegal things and then entrap them. Okay, which is what I think would have been their thing if it started leading back to the anti-Castro Cubans and they started pointing fingers at the FBI. The FBI would have said, "Hey, we were leading an investigation to bust them on attempting to assassinate the president, but they got away with it before we were able to entrap them." And that's the whole cover up there, is that we were trying to cover our tracks. We didn't know they were going to kill the president, but apparently that's what they did. So who made all these decisions to do these things? So Cyril Wecht asked a lot of good questions. And we're going to go into a couple of these questions. And I'm going to use perplexity to kind of go over and answer those questions and make that a starting point. Okay? So let's hear the fantastic Cyril Wecht with his obvious questions of what he thought about the assassination.
Even people on the other side, maybe after listening to this for 3 days plus, will come to understand and reflect back, most of which, perhaps all of which they know, and come to realize, hey, if it is this simple, if it is this straightforward, what's the problem? Wherein lies the basis for any hesitation? Let's get to it. And let's see all of those sequestered records, those obfuscated reports, those missing documents, the x-rays and the photographs that were recorded but somehow are not around.
So he's talking in 2002, 24 years ago. Okay? And even though the AARB said all the files were supposed to be released in 2017, they didn't get released until Trump came into office in 2025, 8 years later. Okay? And again, I always make the point that, criminals are not going to write up interoffice memos about their criminal plans. They're not going to, you're never going to find a memo that says, yeah, the CIA, so and so with the CIA, and so with the FBI, and so with the military, and so with the Secret Service. We all got together in a dark, smoky room and all decided to kill Kennedy, and we're going to pay these Cuban assassins and these Nazi guys to assassinate Kennedy while the Secret Service, withdraws his protection. and we're all going to pin it on Oswald. You're never going to find a memo like that. Okay. But what you can do from all these documents is see their intentions before. They were planning assassinations all around the country. See the perpetrators, the people that many suspect of carrying out the assassination. Yeah, they were definitely capable and had the skills and the will to do it. And then you see the cover up after that. And, you know, 2026 is, what is that, 40, 37, and 20, 50, almost 60 years later. And again, like you just said, if it's just some lone communist nut, what's the big deal? It should be obvious. Just release the documents. Why are things top secret? Why? It's just a lone crazed nut that shot the president. Why are the Oswald's tax returns top secret? Still, even today, they haven't released those. Okay. And one thing I know from reading a lot of FBI documents is that what you're seeing in those FBI documents are what's going, like, from the field offices to the headquarters, or between field offices, or from the headquarters to the field offices. You're not seeing the discussions that are going on inside the field offices. Okay? We're not seeing transcripts of the interrogations of suspects or witnesses. We're not seeing the field notes of the FBI agent who went out and interviewed someone. Okay? Because believe me, I know. I've had FBI agents come by my house and they write down their notes on little pads. And I'm sure they go back and they type up a little memo to their boss to justify what they did for a couple hours that day. Okay? We're not seeing the field notes of those agents. Okay? And all the, those agents will type up a summary of their field notes to their boss. And so, like, say someone is investigating a bank robbery in Portland, they may have 4 or 5 different witnesses. So he sends out 4 or 5 different agents. Those 4 or 5 different agents will go out and interview those 4 or 5 different witnesses. They'll take field notes. They'll type up a summary memo. Okay. They'll send it to their boss. You got 4 or 5 different memos going to their head boss in that section. Okay. That person, their boss, may type up a summary to give to his boss for the station. Okay. And then that station chief may send it off to the Department of Justice or the FBI headquarters in DC if that's necessary. So what we see is only the inter-office memos. We're not seeing the field agent notes or the field agent's inter-office memo to their boss. Not counting, that all these field agents may have gone into a meeting with their boss for 2 hours and discussed the case. There's no transcript. There's no nothing. And then that field agency, the SAC headquarters, may decide to bring in witnesses, okay, and videotape them, record them, interview them, interrogate them, put them under lie detector tests. We don't see any of that, okay? All we see are the summaries. So who makes those decisions? And then, you've got the Warren Commission. They had no investigators of their own. All they relied on was what the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service chose to give them. Okay, so again, and it's just like with the National Archives. There's no warrant from the National Archive going out to the CIA or the FBI or the Secret Service saying, "Hey, we want to search through your files and pull these all these documents you have on this," is voluntary. They're voluntarily giving up the memos that they choose to give to the National Archives. Now they can say that's all we got. Okay, it's just no different than if the police came to my door and they suspected me of, I don't know, bank fraud or whatever, and they said, "We would like you to go through all your records and pull any records that show any kind of guilt to this crime that we're going to commit. We're going to investigate and charge you with." How honest do you think that I would be at giving them any incriminating information? And people say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," but they may have done that in the beginning, but they can't hold that forever because people die and people move on and stuff like that. Yeah, but you may have certain files, like you know, like your dad may have certain records, family records, okay, and he may pass it on to the eldest or to you, and say, "Look, you need to keep track of this. This is great granddad's diary, or his deeds or record or whatever," and you're a legacy keeper. There are probably legacy keepers that people don't even know about, even in the FBI or the CIA or the Secret Service, that have been handpicked, okay, from Dulles to someone he trusts, and from that person, someone he trusts, or maybe a few people they trust, okay. So there's probably legacy keepers, inside those groups that keep those records in a separate department, not just in the general file for anyone to rummage through. That's why when we get records, it's very innocuous. They're talking about Oswald pubic hairs and shit like that. And again, the Warren Commission, they can only go by what the FBI, the Secret Service, and the CIA chooses to give them. And then there's the filtering process with them. If they're being guided by Dulles, who'd been fired by Kennedy, who's definitely involved in the assassination over at, while he's hiding out at Camp Perry and directing the assassination. And when you look at the records of the Warren Commission, Dulles was at every single, you know, meeting there. Why did they choose active senators and people who had other jobs to do and had to go vote and had to go read up and meet constituents and had other business and couldn't attend to the Warren Commission, full time? Why did they do that? Alan Dulles was retired on a CIA pension. He had all the time in the fucking world. Even Warren was still the head of the Supreme Court hearing cases. Okay? President Johnson did that on purpose. Distinguished men, but busy men. And then Dulles could basically run the whole damn commission. So let's listen more of what Cyril Wecht has to say.
Let's go back to November 22nd, 1963. Let's see who's responsible for the morass that exists. Let's see who is at fault for the problems that remain with us. Is it the critic researchers? Those of us who are gathered here tonight? Were we responsible for the selection of two pathologists, Humes and Boswell, who had never done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers, to do the post-mortem examination on our president? I am repulsed by that, just as a citizen of America, and admittedly, perhaps more so as a forensic pathologist. My former chief, Russell Fisher, Milton Halpern in New York, Geoffrey Mann in Virginia, Joe Spellman in Philadelphia, Alan Moritz in Cleveland, Dick Ford in Boston. These are the people that were the giants in their field. They lectured at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. When I was in the Air Force, my chief sent me there knowing of my interest and plans to go into forensic pathology. They were used by the government back through and following World War II. Every one of them was excluded because they shared the same deficiency, the flaw that was in common amongst their ranks. They were civilians. To call in 2 people who had never done a gunshot wound autopsy to do this autopsy. Yes, they brought in Pierre Fink as an afterthought, an Army man in the naval setting, arriving an hour late. And Pierre, the one person that I did know personally, a very decent guy, Pierre was largely limited to military-type stuff over in Vietnam, reviewing the cases. He had very little hands-on experience, and they did not do autopsies at the AFIP. And when Pierre had the audacity to open up his mouth and he asked, and I can close my eyes, I wasn't there, but I never picked up, this punctilious Swiss gentleman, and he said in that crisp tone of his, "Who is in charge here?" And a gruff voice from the audience came forward and said, "I am. Just proceed, doctor." 4 star admirals and generals in the room that night, 3640 people. That was a scientific endeavor. It was a controlled military operation. That's.
Did you hear what he just said? Do you get the implications of what he's saying? Did you hear what he said? 6 of the top pathologists, autopsy doctors in the country, who the government itself would use on a much lesser case than the assassination of the president, and had used for 20 years, were never called. Never. Not even afterthought. 6 at the top. That the government wouldn't have hesitated. You know, if a Supreme Court judge had a heart attack or a senator slipped down a flight of stairs, the government would have definitely called them to get their opinion on the autopsy. But who do they choose? 2 military. Essentially, what he's saying is, let's say your daughter needed brain surgery, okay? And you took her to the hospital, and they said, well, our 2 finest surgeons are here, but we've got 2 nurses that we think can do the job, or orderlies. And we're going to have them do the surgery, your brain surgery on your daughter. Would you go along with that? Probably not. But yet, in the most important autopsy, I mean, think about it. Since the the Lincoln assassination, they choose these 2 military flunkies, Holmes and Boswell. Did you hear him? They've never done gunshot wound autopsies before. Anyway, so that is the first question. Who chose? Who chose? I think it's Humes and Boswell to do the JFK autopsy. These are the questions. I'm sure there have been others that have answered these questions much smarter than me, but I want to know myself. I don't know if Perplexity can give me the answers, but we'll get a start. Okay? Because people just assume, oh, well, there was an autopsy and they said that, yeah, it was definitely, from the back, and it was definitely, Oswald. It says Navy Surgeon General Edward C. Kinney selected Humes and Boswell to perform the JFK autopsy. On November 22nd, 1963, after the president assassination in Dallas, his body was transported to the Bethesda Naval Medical Center for the autopsy. Navy Surgeon General Edward C. Kinney directly ordered Commander James Hume, then director of the laboratories at Bethesda, and Commander J. Thornton Boswell to conduct it, with Humes as the lead pathologist. They were chosen due to the decision to use Bethesda linked to Kennedy's Navy service, despite neither being certified forensic pathologists. Boswell even called the venture choice stupid compared to the nearby Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. So let's see, you're in that hospital, and the head of the hospital says, no, no, well, okay, we won't use a nurse or an orderly, but we do have this surgeon that performs foot surgery, and he can do your daughter's brain surgery. How comfortable would you feel? Key context: Admiral Galvin Galloway, Bethesda's commanding officer, overruled for a rushed exam pushed by Kennedy's physician, Rear Admiral George Berkeley, to ensure a full autopsy. A third pathologist, Lieutenant Colonel Pierre Fink, this is the one he was talking about that arrived an hour later joined to assist. The selection reflected military hierarchy and logistics, not specialized forensic expert, sparking later controversy over qualifications and procedure. So instead of with the most important autopsy in the history of the United States, instead of going with the experts, they went for military ranking. The autopsy began at 7:35 Eastern Standard Time, with about 2 dozen observers included military personnel. Humes and Boswell handled the initial examinations, documenting wounds amid pressure to locate bullets quickly. This set up hasty personal picks among urgent conditions, fueled decades of debate of the Warren Commission reviews and later probes. So here's a question I have. What time did the JFK plane arrive from Dallas back to DC? Now watch this. Air Force One carrying President Kennedy's body from Dallas arrived at Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, D.C. at 5:58. Okay? Upon touchdown, the body was quickly transferred to a waiting ambulance for transport to Bethesda Naval Hospital, where the autopsy began at 7:35. Trying to remember the name of the 30 to 40 minutes, folks. So if it arrived at 6:04, they arrived at Bethesda's front entrance at 6:55. The autopsy began at 7:35. So if it takes 30 minutes, let's say 40 minutes, it's 6:45. So what was happening to the president's body from 6:45 to 7:35, folks? Now, if you watch Really Plaza UK, it had some really, really good um, videos about this, where they talk about there was a pilot of a helicopter who arrived outside, was that Andrews? Or at Andrews near the plane. He was ordered to fly there, and a body was loaded off the back of the plane onto his helicopter. Now, we all saw the video or the news footage where the body, the casket, is taken off and put into a hearse, and Jacqueline Kennedy gets into the hearse. And she can't open the door, and they open the door, and they get in, and they drive off. Okay? When you see the interviews between the guy who loaded Kennedy's body into the hospital in Parkland and the guy who offloaded Kennedy's body into the autopsy room, the guy in Parkland says that it was a brand new casket. He had a sheet wrapped around his head, and they laid him in the casket. The guy at Bethesda said it was a cheap military style casket, and the president's body was inside a plastic rubber body bag. Completely different caskets in situations. How did that happen? There's an FBI memo that says that two FBI agents, when they looked at the body, I can't remember if it was being loaded on at Dallas or offloaded. I believe it was offloaded. Said that, oh, it was offloaded. When it was being offloaded and brought to Bethesda, said that it looked like the president had surgery done to it. And even Boswell exclaims out loud inside the autopsy, huh, there's been surgery done to the head. Why would someone do surgery to the head? And who would authorize that? Now, let's go back to Edward Kinney. We got about 3 minutes. Who was Edward Kinney? Bethesda. So we're going to work our way up the command here. Okay? Rear Admiral Edward Kinney was a surgeon. There's his background. So we got about 1.5 minutes here. It goes over his background. And we'll pick up starting off with him. Okay? All right. Take care, folks.